The U.S. military storyline in the Middle East is getting quite confusing. You have the United States' involvement within Israel, you have the United States getting a drone knocked out of the sky, and then you have the United States in the middle of a random conflict with proxy units taking out storage facilities. Okay, where do we begin? Let's go ahead and start with Israel. Most people are aware of what's happening in Israel right now. The country is cut in half. Gaza, you have northern operations which are going on right now. Israeli combat engineers are truly the star of the show right now for Israel. They are quite literally in charge of a near impossible task of trying to clear out tunnel systems. Now, here's what's interesting. Israel has indicated they're not necessarily going after the entirety of tunnel systems. I'll explain in a second. More so going after the entrances of tunnel systems. Israel realizes that if they totally collapse tunnel systems, they have a high risk of taking out their own hostages, but they also have an even higher risk of secondaries going off. Secondaries being UXO placed on top of these tunnel systems, and they can go off due to collateral damage. Again, secondaries go off from demolitions. Now, something else I want to point out is that expect this campaign to move very slow and to take a long time, due to the fact that the Prime Minister of Israel now is under no obligation to complete this conflict within a certain time frame. This is because the Prime Minister, Israel, has announced that Israel will be in Gaza indefinitely and be in control of security. So now there's not going to be this blitz or a rush to try clearing out all of Gaza. I mean, I think Israel hopes they want to save hostages, but they are at the point now when you say they're going to be there forever, Israel's going to be in Gaza forever, what's the rush? And so because of this, we actually have an indication from President Biden during a CNN interview when he was asked how does he think about the progression of Israeli defense forces in Gaza, talking about the ceasefire and the pause. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, real quick, the United States and outside entities, other countries, were asking for Israel to take a tactical pause, a ceasefire. Stop what you're doing just for a short amount of time so humanitarian aid can get into northern Gaza. Israel was very reluctant to allow this to happen. In fact, Israel sort of leaked on their own Navy gun cams that Israel was already operating in northern Gaza and sort of allowing for a ceasefire. Now, President Biden, and I quote, it's taken a little bit longer than I hoped for, meaning that the United States has a ton of influence on Israeli operations right now. There's been a ton of speculation on whether or not the United States can actually tell Israel what to do. And it always seems like whenever the United States talks about Israel, or whenever the United States sends a representative to Israel, a new action happens. When President Biden visited with Israel, just a few days later, we had the invasion. When Antony Blinken came back to talk to Israel, now all of a sudden Israel is really big on humanitarian aid. They're showing all of the evidence that they're helping the people of Gaza. But this is definitely the division between the U.S. military and between Israel. Because look, we're all asking Israel, hey, 4-hour pause at the max. Do you know how long a 4-hour pause is? That allows for Hamas to do whatever they need to do or to escape a region via the tunnel systems. Gaza is not that big, and Hamas can do whatever they need to do within 4 hours. So again, on Israeli Defense Force social medias, you have depictions, videos, pictures of Israel allowing for open lanes, of the citizens of Gaza to go from northern Gaza to southern Gaza. You have trucks of humanitarian aid going to the people of Gaza. So it does look like Israel is for sure working with the humanitarian efforts, but without a doubt, Israel is also heavily involved with combat operations in northern Gaza, more specifically clearing out tunnel systems, etc. The last thing on the U.S. military's involvement with Israel, again, the U.S. military's main objective is to get the hostages, and it looks like Israel is on a totally different objective. They are there to eliminate Hamas. The United States is there to save their own people. And one thing to point out is that Israel is requesting drones from the United States. So it looks like whenever the U.S. asks Israel to stop what they're doing or like this tactical pause, Israel almost wants something in return to listen to the United States. I find it quite interesting. Now, beyond the borders of Israel, let's go a little down south towards Yemen. We all know that the Houthi faction operates in Yemen. If you are not aware of that, there is a faction called the Houthis. They are not legally an entity within Yemen, but they have the control and power in Yemen. They have about a $500 million bankroll. They are a legit proxy unit, rebel unit. And look, they are a threat to Israel and the United States. So here's what's happening. Around the start of the war, you had the Houthis actually launch drones and munitions towards Israel. And this was sort of the first time people are realizing, look, the Houthis have firepower. Whether or not they are an actual threat, we still have to keep our eyes on them. Now, the U.S. Navy was able to intercept a Houthi attack. Many people said, well, the Houthis were attacking the U.S. Navy. That was debunked. The Houthis were launching munitions up the Red Sea towards Israel, and again, U.S. Navy intercepted the drones and munitions. Now, ever since then, the U.S. military, Navy, has had a large presence in the Red Sea because the U.S. military is playing the big brother game where we are trying to protect Israel from outside forces as Israel focus on the inside forces, Hamas. And so we now have confirmed that an MQ-9 Reaper was taken down by the Houthis. This is a massive deal, but it's also quite a pattern with the U.S. military in losing drones. Essentially, the Houthis had reported that an MQ-9 Reaper drone was taken out. Nobody believed it, and then they released their own footage of taking out the drone, and then the United States said, yeah, it's true, our own drone got taken out. But what exactly does this mean? Well, what it means is this. Drones are intended to get taken out. There's a reason why they are unmanned. So many people tried to turn this into the biggest deal ever. The big deal is not that the drone got taken out. The big deal is that you have proxy units like the Houthis who have the capability of taking down aircraft that are supposed to be some of the most high-tech pieces of equipment on Earth. So from this point on, you cannot take the Houthis as a joke. Without a doubt, it's highly unlikely that the Houthis will be able to actually strike Israel. They are just really trying to get in on this conflict and show that they support Palestine. But nonetheless, the United States sort of found out the hard way. Look, we don't have total control or air superiority anymore. I mean, we did in Afghanistan and the majority of our conflicts in the Middle East. But with the Houthis, again, this is big. They were able to take out a drone, and the United States has to be careful. Will this spark a new conflict? Absolutely not, because again, drones are meant to be taken out. But again, the United States has had drones taken out by Russia. I mean, they've had like oil dropped on the drone midair. They've had a crash into a drone, and the United States didn't get into a total regional conflict over that. And you also have to understand, in Yemen, there's an untalked about humanitarian crisis going on over there. So the last thing the United States wants to do is to fall into what's happening to Israel, where Israel is going after Hamas, but they also are now in the middle of their own humanitarian crisis. And the last thing the U.S. wants is now, hey, we're going to go after the Houthis, but if there's any collateral damage, the United States is obligated via the Geneva Convention to not allow for collateral damage, but to also help the civilians of Yemen. Okay, now from Yemen up to Syria, it's no secret that U.S. combat operations are ongoing in Syria. This has been a thing even before the war in Israel. And recently we had F-15s take out infrastructure related to proxy units, the enemies of the United States in Syria. Now, for those of you who are not in the underground media or reading up on Twitter or forums, many people are actually quite shocked how much U.S. citizens have zero idea about the combat activity against U.S. military members. The number is not quite accurate. It's like anywhere from 43 to 60 attacks have happened. Drone attacks and munitions being launched to U.S. military members between Syria and Iraq. And among the 45 to 60-ish attacks happening to U.S. military members, the U.S. military has only responded twice. The first time with an F-16 attack again in Syria, and this was because President Biden actually instituted the attack. And now you have F-15s going after, again, more infrastructure. But what's very telling is that the U.S. military is not going after the actual proxy soldiers, the compounds of the proxy soldiers. No, we're going after storage facilities. And look, in the long term, the long run, it's important you go after the storage facilities, but I actually think it's quite telling how the US military might not be able to actually find these proxy units. I mean, they blend in with the population. And I'll be completely transparent with you, I don't watch the mainstream media. I hate even using that word, but apparently, this is what I'm being told, Many people are not reporting on this. Many people don't know the severity of how much U.S. military members are getting attacked. People don't know we have over 30 injuries, we have 2 medevacs out of military bases, and we have 1 casualty from a contractor trying to escape an attack. He had a heart attack. Now, look, I know everybody has their own agenda, and I know you have to be selective on what you report, but if we were in the middle of a campaign like in Afghanistan again or Iraq, everybody would be reporting on this, but for some reason, Syria and Iraq, current state, it's like they get a pass. No one talks about this. Now, do I think the U.S. military is being extremely careful and they don't want to waste their resources on 1 or 2 guys? Absolutely, yes. The U.S. military has all of their firepower in the region because the White House has requested to the U.S. military, you need to prepare for a worst-case scenario. The worst-case scenario is not a bunch of ragtag rebel groups who are trying to attack your base. The worst-case scenario is if all of a sudden the Middle East turns on the U.S. military and major militaries and countries start to go into a conflict. With all of the firepower in the Middle East, it allows for the U.S. military to buy some time or at least try to fend off an attack from a major military. The firepower in the Middle East is meant to be a deterrent to those guys, not the proxy units who are launching a couple drones here or there. However, it does go to show the state of combat today, how the U.S. military is in a region. However, almost every single day, sometimes twice a day from the beginning of the war in Israel, the U.S. military has been attacked. Again, almost every single day. And not only that, you're getting new proxy units we've never heard of just coming up out of nowhere, posting on social media, releasing their own combat footage and showing the world, look, we launched a strike towards the U.S. military and they did absolutely nothing about it. Now, I'm the last guy to say we need to go after everybody, we need revenge on everybody. Again, I think the U.S. military is being extremely careful. It makes more sense to try fending off these attacks. Now, if it gets super severe where you have actual ground troops coming towards your base, that's a totally different scenario. The U.S. military has invested a lot in anti-drone measures and anti-munitions measures. I mean, we even had about 600 soldiers deployed to the Middle East with missile defense systems. So, as it stands, the United States is quite involved in the Middle East. I don't think this is an overhyped story. Again, you had a drone taken out. You have F-15s, F-16s being utilized against proxy units infrastructure. One thing that does surprise me is that the United States refuses to say the reason why they're getting attacked is because of Israel. Like, literally, when you go and look up what the Pentagon is saying is happening, there's just a regional instability. They will not say, just like in Niger, Africa, what the root of the issue is. The U.S. military is tied to Israel. It's as simple as that, but the Pentagon refuses to say that. And the reason why I brought up Niger, Africa, when Niger, Africa was starting to melt down and the French were eventually kicked out, the U.S. military refused to say Niger is in the middle of a coup. They just said, well, it's not looking too good. It sort of looks like a coup, but we're just going to sit here and hope everything happens. And the U.S. military strategy actually worked. The U.S. military is still in Niger, Africa. They never got kicked out, but the French did. So I just wanted to point that out for the confusion out there. The U.S. military will not say they are getting attacked because of the war in Israel. They will not say it.